Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. Today, I wanted to outline an Atlas strategy that is designed for helping you get your first 25 Divines inside patch 3.28, the Mirage League. This is not something that's super optimized for top-end powerhouse characters. You'll notice, for instance, if you're browsing through this, that there have been some choices made where a little bit of potential loot has been sacrificed in order to avoid things getting out of control with difficulty. For example, through this central wheel, we path through the right, which just adds loot and not all that much of it, rather than pathing through the left, which adds both loot and difficulty, and it adds more loot than you'll get from the right-hand side. As your character gets stronger though, feel free to reverse some of these decisions. So you might elect to go with mounting modifiers at some point. It is something that will get you better results than you'll otherwise get, and you'll also be able to upgrade from 4 mod maps or just typical rare maps that have been alched into things that are a bit juicier like 8 mod maps. What are we doing with this strategy? At its core, we want to pay attention to what's been learnt so far about the way that Mirages spawn. Mirages appear to almost always or always have Varashta, who's the anchor point of the Mirage, spawn next to a League mechanic. For this reason, we want to ban as many League mechanics as we can from spawning. This is why we're even doing things like blocking Heist. Blocking Heist normally is a complete meme. You're deleting loot from your maps and you're doing so without compensation. However, in this strategy, it actually is a viable point. And that's because the last thing you want is for Varashta to spawn next to a smuggler's cache and then to not be able to reach over to the Harvest. We want her to choose the Harvest wherever possible. However, we can't guarantee she always chooses the Harvest. Sometimes an Essence will spawn in your map and she'll choose that. Sometimes a Shrine will spawn, a Strongbox or whatever. In that situation, our fallback is that investing into a mechanic appears to result in a bias towards Varashta choosing that. It's only a bias, it's not overwhelming, but on top of that, we also want to pick a map that is less sprawled out. And that way, in my experience, it's more likely that if Varashta does choose to spawn next to a shrine, that she will still reach out and include your harvest zone. It's been my experience playing with this that about 85% of the time, Varashta's Mirage area will cover the harvest. So that's the reason we're blocking so much. It's also the reason we're electing to go with Beyond for the rest of our points. You just don't have enough points on the tree to invest solely in Harvest. And for that reason, we then need to look for some other ways to spend points that are useful, but that don't add additional anchor points. Beyond is one of these mechanics. You could also invest into Eater of Worlds altars if you prefer, and that's something that can add a fair bit of danger, but also a fair bit of reward. Or you could even invest into Searing Exarch altars if you preferred. So you've got a bunch of flexibility there. I've elected to go with Beyond here, and the Scarab selection will also reinforce that. When we come to the Scarabs, you also notice that for Harvest, there are only 2 Scarabs worth using. There's the Harvest Scarab of Doubling, which we do use, and then there is the top-end juicer-oriented Harvest Scarab of Cornucopia. We're not going to use that because it's going to add quite a lot of danger to your maps. You can use it, it will give you good results, but it's also something that's much more difficult. You make up your own mind whether you want to use it, but I'm not going to present a strategy that does use it. It's also something that's very expensive in comparison. So our strategy is to spend less than 10 chaos every map, whereas with Harvest Scarab of Cornucopia, I think the last time I bought them, they were about 45C and rising. So keep that in mind. It's an option, but it's not the way we're going to go. Let's go through the harvest support on the tree quickly. Firstly, we have the chance to contain the Sacred Grove. We actually don't need this when we're using a Fruiting Astrolabe, but sometimes you'll forget to apply a Fruiting Astrolabe, and Call of the Grove cluster, as well as a couple other incidental points, they will bail you out when you make that mistake. They'll prevent you from just completely destroying an entire map. You don't actually strictly need it. If you're completely disciplined at always using a Fruiting Astrolabe, then you will be able to just get by without this. After this, Bumper Crop and Bountiful Harvest. This cluster boosts the amount of harvest monsters that are present by quite a lot, and on top of that also gives you some of this very valuable increased quantity of life force stat. Basically everything here is great. Duplication of monsters, fantastic. This whole cluster is great. You definitely want every single point in it. After this, we have this cluster for doubling season. This gives you a chance for harvest life force to be duplicated, and you also get quantity of life force. Again, this is just a more multiplier to the amount of loot that you're getting. There's also one point here that grants you chance to contain Sacred Grove as well. Finally, we have the best cluster and the worst cluster, but the worst cluster is worth taking. So Harvest Tier 3 plant chance, this is fantastic. Most of the loot that you get will be from Harvest Tier 3 plants. So these are fantastic. You also get some tier 4 plant chance. It's not very much, and the tier 4 plants, they're the big harvest bosses. They're still rare enough that you won't see them very often, but they're a bonus. And also you have this 10% chance for the unchosen crop to not wilt. What this means is that instead of just getting the better of the two harvests, you get the better and the worse, but only 10% of the time. Finally, we have the crop rotation cluster. Do not take crop rotation. This is an excellent node for a totally different strategy. We're not playing that strategy. We don't want crop rotation at all. So make sure you don't take it. If you have the points to spare, and you do not need to do this, but if you do have the points to spare, allocate Wild Drought. Wild Drought is pretty solid, but it's not amazing. And that is under the current Trade League economy, where yellow life force is worth the most, blue is just slightly less than yellow, and then red is quite a bit less. However, this is the sort of thing that can change over time as well, so just keep an eye on it. And if it does turn out that you start seeing red getting back to 4 figures per divine, then at that point, maybe you don't want these points anymore, and you can allocate them somewhere else. If in doubt, if you do have more points, you can always just pick up Shaping the Skies cluster here. It's just always good. It's never great, it's always good. Okay, so that is all of the harvest support. What about the other stuff? Well, we're taking all these quantity nodes because quantity is reasonably good, and unlike the map modifier effect nodes that you've got, which are up here, it doesn't add any difficulty to your maps. It just adds extra loot. Likewise, we've got these quantity and rarity nodes as well. They're just more of that good stuff. We are, however, taking a few of these map modifier effect nodes, even though they do add some difficulty, because they let you path up to synthesize stability. What this allows you to do is just run Bog all the time in conjunction with Astrolabes. Now, fruiting Astrolabes at the time I'm recording this video are very affordable, like 50 or 60 chaos, but that actually works for many maps at a time. And because the Scarabs we're using in this strategy are so cheap, that ends up being really good. Lastly, I'm experimenting with Grasp of the Past. I am not convinced that this is worth taking at all, but it's just something I've been playing around with. And also these two Originator Influence map nodes are pretty good as well. Okay, so that's Tree North. Now we have the Beyond support. For Beyond, we are not taking Endless Tide. This means that Beyond events end in a map. We will spawn a boss at some point, usually, and in fact, we're going to end up spawning 3 bosses, at least on the hardest version of this farm, because we have the Scarab for that. So you'll spawn 3 bosses, and then afterwards, you'll end up not having any more Beyond monsters spawn. We're then taking most of the points that cause Beyond to spawn and increase merging radius, but at the same time, we are not taking this cluster up here. Now, there are arguments you could make for taking these points. I just feel like they're not worth it at the moment. Now, if I did have all of the points that are available for completing all of the Nightmare maps, then at that point, I might consider taking those as well. Now we need to talk about Scarab strategies. So, we're using 5 Scarabs at the moment. However, you don't need to use 5. Let's go through the 5 Scarabs and what they all do. Firstly, we have the most important. This is the critical one. Harvest Scarab of Doubling. This thing is amazing. A life force dropped by harvest monsters in the area is duplicated. Harvest monsters in the area have 100% more life. So that is going to make those tier 4 bosses quite tanky when they spawn. But in exchange for that, you're getting a tremendous amount of loot. This is absolutely non-negotiable. Do not remove this. If you're having trouble with the 100% more life, the solution is to run easier maps. So instead, just be a bit more picky on rolling your maps, go with easier mods, and then you will be fine dealing with these monsters. Afterwards, we're using Beyond Scarab of the Invasion. This is incredibly powerful at just disgorging an enormous amount of Beyond monsters, and you'll notice that 2 of the other Scarabs we're using have been chosen to synergize with this. So, every time you slay a rare monster, also unique monsters, but rare monsters will do most of this, it's going to spawn 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12 at random additional Beyond portals. These will generally be close enough to immediately spawn 2 Beyond packs. When this happens, you're then going to have a whole bunch of extra monsters to fight. Now, this doesn't chain react. The rare monsters that spawn from this do not end up spawning new Beyond portals, but this will give you a very large amount of additional Beyond monsters to fight. Also, we're using these very cheap Scarabs, Scarab of Adversaries. What these do, they add 4 packs of monsters to the map, and each pack contains a rare monster plus a second copy of that rare monster. So each of these Scarabs adds 8 rare monsters to your maps, which then means something like 16 additional Beyond packs will spawn. This ends up being really strong because you can use 2 of them, and these are just free on trade. You can pick up 100 of these for like 40 chaos at the moment. So definitely pick up a bunch of these. They're so cheap, and they're also common enough that they're never going to go up in price either. Finally, we're using Beyond Scarab of Resurgence. This is the 5th Scarab. If you haven't yet done a Nightmare map, don't include this one. You don't need it. This is something that will then cause Beyond bosses that spawn in your area to be accompanied by Beyond bosses of other factions. So if the RNG decides that it's time to spawn Baidat, then this will also spawn Katash and Gore as well. These Beyond bosses drop 20% increased tainted currency, and you also increase your chances of spawning a Beyond boss. These are really strong, and they're also very, very cheap as well. So of these Scarabs, the only one that's worth anything is the Harvest Scarab of Doubling, and it's not worth very much. For map selection, we're going easy. You can go harder, and doing so will provide more rewards, but I want to demonstrate that this is a strategy that can be done on reasonably easy maps. So here's a very easy map. This has nothing particularly heinous on it at all, and I'm just going to run this with a bit of commentary, give you a sense as to exactly what's going on. Influence, we have uninvested Eater of Worlds at the moment. You can either go Eater of Worlds or Steering Exarch here. The main reason I do this actually is that they spawn additional packs of monsters, and that's something that's really useful. If you go with the Eater of Worlds or Steering Exarch and invest in them, that would probably come at the expense of being speccing to Beyond, and then at that point you'd want to use various other Scarabs, like Influencing Scarab of Hordes would be something you'd consider. So let's have a look at the Astrolabe setup as well. Here you'll see that we have an Astrolabe that's been enhanced a couple of times already. This one we've gotten quite unlucky on because Synthesized Stability has really aggressively cut it down. But complete all harvest plots in a map in order to successfully complete maps within this shape region. This has to be the harvest that's in the main map, not any reflection of it. When you do this, the rest of your entire Astrolabe, the monsters in the harvest will get tougher. And that's important to note. That's going to potentially make things really nasty. Now, you can have a look and cherry pick particular mods that are really, really good. For example, harvest crops in your maps have 25% chance to contain tier 3 plants. That's really good, but I don't really feel like doing Lava Chamber. Or you go with Arcade, which has even better things, but I'm just going to stick with Bog because Bog is familiar and Bog is well laid out for the strategy that we're using. Also, when I'm applying an Astrolabe, I also apply it to Bog at the start. Let's demonstrate this, and you get to see this in action here. My loot filter shows every pile of life force, no matter the size, and actually makes an unnaturally large amount of sound for some of them. We have an RNG Einhar event in this map, so we'll just quickly let that play out, deal with those monsters. The build that I'm playing here, I've kept moderately cheap. I think I'm using a 10 Divine Wand, and otherwise it's just a fairly stock standard budget version of the Kinetic Fusillade Totems. It's a very powerful setup, and Pelstron has a good guide to it. I've deviated from Pelstron's strategy a bit. I've gone a bit more offensive, using a Shaper Influence Shield instead of using his setup of Aegis Aurora. Not saying that he's wrong. I've just decided I'd go more Glass Cannon because I'm reasonably okay both with dying and also with running around while monsters are being killed off by my skills. I am, however, picking up Kinetic Wands. They're I-83 ones, just so that I can then do a future recombination craft into something better than I've got. Now, when we have an Eldritch thing here, you're mostly looking for things that are basically harmless. And here, both of the upsides are pretty much trash, but we're just using it as a way to spawn monsters. Here we have Varashta. Varashta is spawned right next to the Sacred Grove, and typically, but not always, in Bog, you'll also find that Varashta will spawn near the boss of the map as well. We'll go in and we'll do the Sacred Grove first version first. Here, we're going to be looking at the choices you get to make. Now, what you want to do is assign a score to each plot. 6 points if they've got a boss, a tier 4 boss. 1 point for each tier 3. The tier 3s stand out by the text of the Vivid Whipleg here. It is clearer when it's seen on your screen. It may not be quite as clear in the video, but there is a definite color differential. The tier 2s are the ones that are white, and the tier 1s are grey, but the tier 3s are a very, very faint blue. So this one has 2 points. Now, if there is a tie, you want to prioritize yellow over blue, blue over red, and you also want to pay attention to Vivid Devourers. Vivid Devourers can be absolutely obnoxious, and if it's a tie, I will actually pick red over yellow if there's Vivid Devourers as the yellow ones. That's because they can, if you get very unlucky monster mods on them, they can become very dangerous, and it's Proximity Shield that's the dangerous mod to get there. So we're going to set this one off because it's worth 2 points. But note that you do have to do every single cluster here because of the Astrolabe mechanics. So even if they're both disappointing, both 0 points, you still need to do them both. Once the monsters are slain, just go scoop loot, and we're looking at something like 900, I think, 844 there, so that's 0.1 divines already, because they're currently trading for about 8,500 to the divine. And here we've got 2 points, and it's yellow versus 0 points, and it's blue, so we're going to take 2 points. It's not even tied, so it's not even tied. Set these off. Let the monsters start going splat. A couple of these harvest monsters have nasty on-death effects, so just keep an eye out for those. And then we've got a bunch of extra life force, and you'll notice that Beyond Pack spawned at the end there. My KF totems dealt with them really quickly, but it's something that you'll need to be aware of, that they can be quite obnoxious. Again, it is 1 point only here, so this is a pretty disappointing harvest so far. Most of the time you'll have at least some that are 3 that you'll get to choose between. I do think, though, that for purposes of making a video, it's good to get the disappointing result. And whilst this is not the worst map I've ever had, it's definitely one of the weaker 50%. Beyond encounter there, and now we just scoop the loot. And then once we're done with that, we're going to go and set off the last one. Investigate what we've got as options. Sometimes the Unchosen Crop won't wilt, and then you'll see on your minimap that there'll still be another one up. That hasn't procced here. 2 points, 0 points. So we take the red one, even though red is worth about 20% less than the other two at the moment. That can always change too. Okay, now we'll skip loot and then we'll have a look at what we've got from just this visit into the Grove. We ended up with 2,304 yellow life force. This is approximately 0.26 divines. We had 484 wild life force. That's about 4% of a divine. And we have 0 blue life force. So all in all, we're looking at 30% of a divine from this visit into this harvest. And that is slightly, actually maybe even slightly better than average. But it's not amazing. We'll now go into the reflected version. And while we're here, we're just having a look at what the options are. If you're looking for things here that are particularly good, Wish for Godhood means that it's just trivial. Everything's really easy. It's just free XP, free loot. You're going to have no trouble doing anything. Use that if your character's a bit weak whenever it shows up, unless something extraordinary is there. However, Wish for Phantoms. These monsters are dangerous, but they end up dropping a lot of additional Scarabs. Not that Scarabs are very expensive this league. They also drop additional gold. The can't drop equipment means that they can't drop anything that you can equip to your character, but those items that would be equipment get replaced by a random other loot item. I'm going to take that, but it is more difficult than anything else in here. Currency is something else that's not equipment, and that'll end up replacing a bunch of stuff too, so you will get more currency with this setup. Alright, so now we have these Jin's caches to pop down and loot. We're taking quite a bit of damage from some Beyond monster there. That's an unusually nasty rare monster from Beyond. And we're getting more and more of these low-end loot items. If I turn off my loot filter, you'll see that there'll be like less and different loot than usual. But the loot that is dropping is better than usual, and that's because of that wish that we got. You'll see this one, it's an uncommon one. It's not particularly common, not particularly rare. It's not extraordinarily good.
All I must do is wait, and eventually you will die.
That's an originator map. You can do this strategy on originator maps, but it's going to be much harder because the map mods are nastier. So again, that's something else alongside mounting modifiers to consider as you get stronger. Then you might consider opting into some of that additional difficulty, and you will be paid off for it. Okay, we're going to go into the Grove. There is a reasonably good chance we're going to trigger a Beyond boss in here. So we have 1 and 2. We're going to take 2 points. And then you'll notice also everything's at least tier 2. That is one of the effects that's present from the Astrolabe. So that's the reason that we're getting all these piles of like 60 life force. It's a very common Astrolabe mod, and ouch, I should really have dodged that one. That was reckless and silly, but we got away with it. That was very badly played there by me, though. Now, in the Reflection worlds, you'll sometimes see additional types of monsters that can't normally spawn. They are what I term tier 3.5 monsters, and so that's something that hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate here. Here, there's no difference between the two options. If you're familiar with all the monsters, you might have a preference. I think the Rex Matriarch is easier, but both of these are 1 point and both of them are blue, so there's no difference in loot options that you're getting here. It really just does come down to, if you know the monsters, you probably agree that Rex Matriarchs are easier out of those two. Or at least if you've got Spell Block, they're easier. They're probably actually not easier if you're not playing a character with Spell Block, because they have Jannar the Omen's ability there. Wild Bristle Matrons, these are the most dangerous of the red ones, but 2 reds is still better than 1 yellow. And they're not obnoxious the way that one of the yellow ones is. The reason I say that these are dangerous is that they have an AoE slam that hits a larger area than it looks like it's going to hit. Okay, here we've got the Beyond bosses. This is good. This means the end of the Beyond event for this map. Now, if your character is weaker, you might find that getting all 3 of these at once is tough. In that case, you know which Scarab to remove. Hey, I finally got a Volatile Vaal Orb. That is the first one of those that I've had drop, although I'm aware that I've been unlucky with them. You'll also get a lot of Coins of Desecration, which are practically useless now. Yeah, that is my first Volatile Vaal Orb of the league. They're worth about a Divine, I think. And there's a Primal Reborn, 2 of these versus 1 on the other side. Hopefully we'll get one of the tier 3.5s in the last cluster, but if not, they'll just show up as being 2 different types of tier 3s in the same pack. When they spawn, you'll get your Crystallized Rancor, which is one of the rewards that's only available from Mirage Harvest as well, and you'll also get quite a lot of Harvest Goo from them. Okay, unfortunately we don't have one of those, but they'll have a name that screams that it's undead. It won't start with Wild, it won't start with Primal, it won't start with Vivid, so it'll look out of place, and it'll have the same color as a tier 3. You want to treat those as being worth 3.5 points, and use that information to make your decisions about which ones to do. So a tier 4, which looks like a unique item color, that is 6 points. A tier 3.5 is 3.5 points. A tier 3 is 1 point, and tier 2s and tier 1s don't count. That's how you choose which one to pick. Anyways, that's the strategy. That's a map done, and also everything in it except for the map boss. I do tend to do the map bosses on them, mostly because I am running Eater of Worlds Influence, and it's just a few extra C each map on average from selling the invitation. You don't have to do Eater of Worlds. You can also do Searing Exarch if you prefer. I just find that the Eater of Worlds altar options are mostly easier. Searing Exarch on this character. Here's our Beyond boss outside as well. So this will be, again, Scarab enhanced. We're definitely doing it. And just keep Beta in mind. Keep in mind where Beta is, so that if he does his angled sort of arrow of doom, that you're not caught by it. The others can't really hit you if you keep moving. And then at that point, we just go to the map boss. If the altars aren't popping off, like they aren't in this one, then you're done. If the altars are popping off, then, well, you just play it like it's a normal altar map. Also, I don't enrage this guy. It's just difficulty for basically no reward. It is not worth it. Oops, I forgot to give a summary of everything that was looted there. I'm not going to count the Volatile Vaal Orb, that was a lucky drop. 2,304 Vivid, 0.25 Divines, 2,466 Wild, this is 0.22 Divines maybe, and 1,548 primal. That is like 0.18 divines. So we're looking a bit more than half a divine there on a map that we invested about 10 chaos on, and that also brought us closer, actually 2 maps closer, not 1, to completing an Astrolabe and getting access to one of the vaults again. This vault's been fairly good for me personally. I had a 4-stack of divines in it on the bottom left corner of the vaults, but other people have had better experiences with some of the other ones. So again, you don't have to stick with Bog. I'm just choosing to go with Bog. Okay, and so that's the strategy. That's an example of it. I'm going to leave it there. May your Vaal Orbs and your Volatile Vaal Orbs have interesting results.